Welcome to Sista Brunch with me, Fanchon Cox.
And me, Anya Adams.
We're back and talking to you about Black women plus working in media, entertainment, and the arts. Now, on today's show, we are taking a look back at some of Sista Brunch's most memorable interviews over the past 2 seasons.
First up is our conversation with Amazon Studios' Global Head of Diversity, Latasha Gillespie, and Head of Good Robot at Bad Robot, Mickey Woodard. They shared some gems on getting your foot in the door in the entertainment industry, as well as how their work as DEI and social impact leaders has evolved following 2020's Black Lives Matter protests.
When I talk to young women, I always tell them, looking back, it makes sense. Going forward, it didn't always. And you have to be open to the opportunity that you might not have thought about, because that's really what guided me this whole way through. You know, I started doing this work over 20 years ago, very long time, at a talent agency, working with their clients. But here's the ironic part of that. One of their clients was J.J. Abrams and Katie McGrath.
No. Whoa.
So
Wow.
That tells you that sometimes this path is just made for you. And I've just been really, really fortunate to be able to tap into that. And also about the importance of networking and keeping up your network. I always talk to young women about that too. How are you making sure that you stay connected to the people in your life that mattered? So started out at CAA, went over and did some work with influencers like Kanye and Dr. Phil and others, went back to the corporate side and did this for JCPenney, and now I have this amazing opportunity to lead this work for Bad Robot and also for, the McGrath Family Foundation, along with my colleague who actually runs that entity. So I'm grateful to be here.
Oh,
That's
my goodness.
awesome.
That's that. Don't burn your bridges, y'all. Don't burn your bridges. And we've said many times on this podcast that when you get opportunities, you need to kick ass. Like you need to be somebody that other people ask about later. So, oh my goodness, you started those relationships that long ago.
You need to also call the crowd and see who you like and who you want to be connected to. Because when you find those people before they've exploded, you know their true selves.
Amen.
What about you, Latasha?
Just like Mickey, also a very crooked path. The only thing that was straight about my path was that it always started with praying for the yes or the yuck. So I actually started off in finance. My background is finance. I started off in the manufacturing industry. So very different world than the one I'm currently sitting in. But through that process, every time someone asked me to take on a new opportunity, the first thing I would do was pray for the yes or the yuck. Like, God, is this for me or is it not for me? Right? Because I always want to be in the right place at the right time and never in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if it was a yes, even if it scared me, which most of the time it did, learning to lean into the yes. Learning to lean into the things that absolutely terrified me, that I was not qualified for, that I did not have experience in. But it was in those moments is when I learned a lot of new things. It's in those moments when I learned a lot about myself. It's in those moments when I learned how to create fungible skills that worked across multiple industries in multiple countries, and it just served me well.
Latasha, what were some things that you did to get yourself comfortable with leaning into the yes?
Well, the interesting thing was, and I really do think it has a lot to do with my faith, because I always believe that God has a bigger vision for me than I can have for myself. And I always believe that he knows exactly the path to get there. So sometimes when it's uncomfortable for me, I know it's because there's stretch happening, there's growth happening. And if I've already jumped into something because I'm chasing purpose and I really believe it's my next right step, then I know he's got me.
Yeah. Mickey, can you talk a little bit about you leading social impact, employee engagement, like all of these elements at Bad Robot? Can you talk a little bit about how the recent year has affected your job? I mean, COVID-19 is probably one that's obviously impacted all of us, but also the Black Lives Matter movement and how, it's really kind of been a pervasive kind of experience for all of us, but how it might have changed your work.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is beyond or in addition to what it does to our work, it's how we all change personally. That's been the biggest lesson for me, that no longer are these things separate. It was so easy for me to compartmentalize my day from my night, my work from my home. And now everything's in the same space and everybody sees it. And
Mhm.
so when
Mm.
you are a Black woman leading this work, it means that you are working to help people get through the trauma that you're also experiencing. And so, what I'm grateful for is that I work at an organization where they've been really thoughtful about that, not just for me, but given me the platform and the support that we need to help all of our employees grapple with a very new reality. And so our work has expanded from social impact, from really looking at what can we do for our community and what can we do for our neighbors, to really thinking about who are we? Who are
Yeah.
we together? Who are we apart? How do we learn more about each other? How do we support each other? How do we see each other differently? How do we respect each other? It's been all of those lessons that have translated into programming and support and all kinds of very specific activations. But the core of it really is about humanity.
Ooh. I got to bring this up because I was having this conversation yesterday, doing some social impact work with a theater, and the directors of the theater are two white women, and we were talking about how for the last year, well-intentioned white people have gotten a little browbeaten, and not to say they didn't deserve it, right? But like have gotten a whole lot of focus on like stop talking, be about it, you know. And I feel like we are now moving into a period where maybe there were times during that where we were like, you know what, we don't need you at all. And I feel like we might be leaning into the period of, ooh, we got to all work this out together. And now we got to figure out how. And I think, you know, Mickey, when I think about what you do, because you are working with two very well-known white folks with money, but who have chosen to do the work with that money. And so are you seeing that kind of shift in any ways, or has that always been the case there, that they've always been about doing the work? Like, did this last year change things drastically?
I think both things are true. They have always been about doing the work, and there's been a lot more give and take in the last year. That's that humanity part where we're really seeing, you know, where our starting points are as you connect to all of this. And also, where are the opportunities? Where are the gaps? There are gaps in every single organization, whether that's internally or externally. And this is the time, as you said, to be about it. There is no time for excuses. You have to be unequivocal and have your language and your programming and your culture and your mission and your values. They have to align. And there's a lot of work behind each one of those words.
Latasha, curious about you too, because I mean, look, if any of us work for a major studio or a major production company, we're working directly with white folks with power. Have you seen shifts?
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing was like last year was not a surprise to most Black people and people of color.
Right.
These are things we've lived with our entire lives. You know, when you mentioned in my bio about the CORE conference, that was a conference I started in like 2017, right?
Yeah.
Because we knew these things were happening in these communities, and people couldn't shed that fragility of life when they swiped into our company.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
They carried that with them in everything that they did, which is why I felt like there needed to be a conversation about a messy topic at work, because it was impacting the way people do work.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what this past year has done with, you know, a pandemic, you know, and a murder and, you know, a global uprising, it has caused all of us to be still just a minute. Right. Because if this isn't new, how did we all miss it before? Because we were off doing our own things. But the pandemic forced us all to be still for a minute and witness this together. And so it's funny, and I agree with Mickey so much when she talks about the humanity part, because when people say, you know, the Black community must be hurting over this, and I say, how does a human being look at this and not hurt?
Right.
Regardless of race, this is not a Black community problem. This is a humanity problem, right? We should all feel that way. We should all have those sentiments when we see the anti-Asian hate. We should all be feeling that.
Right.
And so I think what this past year has allowed us to do is be very intentional in language and to call a thing, right? That we no longer have to dance around and pacify and sugarcoat things. We can actually call things what they are. We can talk about oppression as it shows up on screen. We could talk about oppression porn. We could talk about how these stereotypes and tropes are actually hurting our ability to see each other as human beings, right? We can call a thing, and we can also say, guess what? It's not okay for you to say George Floyd died, because he didn't. He didn't have cancer. He wasn't, 100 years old and died of old age. The man was murdered.
Yeah.
Right? And so it allowed us to be very intentional about our language, and then be very intentional about our actions. So if the man was murdered and we believe that it was anti-Black racism specifically, then the solve for that is not going to paint a kindergarten classroom.
Right.
The solve for that is not tutoring.
Right.
The solve for that is systems and structures.
Yeah.
Power, funding. That's the solve for that. So it's no longer, we can't keep tickling this thing, right?
This is Sista Brunch with Fanchon Cox and Anya Adams. Stay tuned for more of our best of Sista Brunch interviews from our past 2 seasons.
Hi, this is Anya Adams.
And Fanchon Cox.
You're listening to Sista Brunch. We're taking a look back at some of our most memorable interviews.
Next up, we hear from TV writer Felicia Mary. We had such a great time with this one. Felicia is also the creator and co-executive producer of Bigger, the hit comedy series on BET+. Felicia left her successful career in public relations and marketing to attend UCLA's MFA in screenwriting program. And while studying for her MFA, she sold her first pilot to HBO. She tells Sista Brunch how she made the decision to leave her cushy career to take a leap of faith and apply to film school. So speaking of dreaming big, at some point you were a little girl somewhere in the world. And
I was born a little girl.
Did you already have dreams about what you would eventually do, or
I think my first dream was to be a bus driver. Once I got past that, after being ignored by every adult when I would bring that up, my first dream was to be an actress and television. I grew up. I have a lovely sister that look. This is a hood story. We met later in life. And my father's other daughter.
Okay.
But I was raised an only child,
Uh-huh.
so the television was my brother, sister, best friend, and I just wanted to be the people on the TV. I didn't know people made TV and what that looked like, but that was my first dream.
Wow.
Yes.
And
What were some of your favorite shows?
Good Times,
Yes.
probably #1. All in the Family. Anything from that vein. Facts of Life. And then getting older. I started to like Friends and Living Single. I call Friends the white Living Single because it is. So I love those shows in the '90s and Martin and A Different World and. So many, and then as I matured, Sex and the City was a favorite, and still to this day is a big inspiration.
I mean, can we just point out that those were shows where you saw people that looked like you, all even as far back as we could go, right? And when we were young, and I think about, oh my goodness, what if we hadn't even had those? Right?
Oh my God, I wouldn't be here. I mean, if it wasn't for. I told Eric Monti, who was co-creator of Good Times and writer of Cooley High, which is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
And he's had a stroke in later in life, and I was able to meet him at a guild meeting, a WGA meeting, the Committee of Black Writers meeting, and a couple of times. And I told him if he didn't jump that train, because he jumped a train to get here from Chicago.
What?
And that's how. And part of that story in Cooley High is Preach's story, is his story about being this sort of elevated young man with these dreams and these gifts and this gift of writing in the hood, and then him escaping. Just even knowing the sort of that backstory, which I learned later. But I think I saw his story through his writing, and I just because I lived in Chicago, that's Good Time was in Chicago or about Chicago.
Yes.
That was a subtle influence that, in retrospect, at meeting him as an adult, I realized, wow, I think. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here right now talking to you.
Somebody was on Twitter talking about what are Black famous people, list Black famous people that if you said them to a white person, they would never know. Cooley High is one of those examples of a film.
Yes.
Right? And it's so important. It's integral to us seeing ourselves and then also us knowing that, because then how did you make the leap from seeing it on a screen to knowing how to do it yourself?
Oh, yeah. I think it's just, like I said, I didn't know that there were writers of the show when I was watching the show as a kid. So at some point, when I just knew what I could see are actors, so that became my obsession. So in undergrad, I did study acting. I auditioned for the theater program there, got in, studied acting, thought I would do it professionally, but somewhere along the line, I was raised by my great-grandparents.
Oh, wow.
My parents, product of the 60s, kind of, got caught up in drugs and alcohol, and unfortunately weren't able to raise me. And the matriarch of the family actually was my great-grandmother, my mother's grandmother.
Wow.
And so because of the sort of generational gap, I did watch a lot of television to stay current, otherwise I'd have been out here bad. But then they just let me sort of do me, because they were like, you going to school past 8th grade, it's good.
Just keep going.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
So I had a freedom, but it's interesting that I put these own we deal with our parents' influences in bigger, but I didn't have a lot of parental influence. I actually put limitations on myself. Like I'm like, how am I going to live as an actress? How does that work? And and I got super scared about it, like at 19, and I was just like, I can't do that. I need a real job when I get out here. So I switched to broadcast journalism. Not knowing that that's damn near not a real job either. But
right.
Oh, I'm on a podcast talking about journalism ain't a real job. But I'm just saying, like, it pays.
Journalist, by the way, so
I appreciate you. No, I mean, like, it is. You start off lowly paid. It's a struggle.
These are
but
all
at
the
least,
facts.
but
So
at
no,
least
I
like
like
that.
that.
No, but it's true, because like the rejection factor isn't there as much as it is for an actor, right? Like you can get something.
You can find the job. Like I got the internship at a news station, and I it felt tangible to me. It felt like, okay, you're getting a paycheck that I know should be coming every 2 weeks, so I did that. That's how that led to closely related as PR to journalism. So that's how I got into PR. Okay. And so it was like I just lived this sort of safe life. Like this feels stable. I could not find my space because it wasn't where I was supposed to be.
Right.
And so I kept running. So I would see sets in Chicago and want to cry, just get emotional. And I was like, oh God, that's not going to go away. I would watch the Oscars and have two elaborate Oscar parties. Just because I wanted to be there, you know what I mean? So I just had this hunger for it, and I realized by my mid-30s, which partially inspired the idea of bigger. In my mid-30s, that's when I sort of hit that early midlife crisis of like, I can't do this anymore. I can't fake it. There's nothing I can acquire that will make me happy. It felt good to say no and walk away, and then move to LA with a roommate for that old. Yes. You know what I mean? Like it just
How do you mind saying how
I was? I would say this journey started in my mid-30s.
Yeah.
So I was pretty up there by the time I was applying to health school.
Right. Which is an awesome thing I think for our listeners to hear. It's like this can happen at any age, and you're following your heart, your passion. You're going to come to it.
Being older and coming into the industry, well, quote unquote older, right? What Hollywood considers older, right? Is that you now are bringing all this other experience. I think about Ava DuVernay, who was also in PR and marketing, and that meant that once she started to be able to tell her stories, she knew how to do. Like she not only told the story, but knew how to get people into it. I can imagine that helped you in pitching for your show, right?
Certainly.
So all those things you did, even though you knew they weren't the thing.
Yeah.
Those also fed you for what you eventually did.
And I had no idea they would.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think about
at the
that.
time.
I thought
it
was a deficit age. I thought it was a deficit. I didn't move out here at 22 and started this career. Yeah. But it actually was a benefit in so many ways.
Yeah.
Number one, like you said, pitching. I was able to sell something in film school, like a pilot in film school, because and that was my first pitch. I didn't have like reps yet or anything. And that was because I pitched things I hated, not things I didn't care about.
Right.
In PR,
Where you could go out and
buy this
step in a
widget
room.
I don't give a shit about. You know what I'm saying? So
but you could step into a room and be comfortable.
Yeah. I was nervous as hell, but or I knew how to pull out a story on why something is important.
Hi, it's Fanshin, and you're listening to Sista Brunch. We'll be right back, and if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at Sista Brunch.
Welcome back to Sista Brunch. We're listening to Felicia Mary tell us why she left a stable career in PR to pursue a career in entertainment. While in film school, Felicia sold her first pilot to HBO. She should be all set, right? Not so fast. Felicia explains that success isn't always a straight line to the top.
I basically, right after I sold the pilot, I got a day job for a while when it didn't go, and that's another thing
What did
about.
you do?
Yeah, what did you do?
I went back to a P. This felt like backwards like hell, and I was very in my feelings about it, and I'm real honest about it, and it's a part of the back and forth of things. Like, just because you go out of your dream doesn't mean it's a straight line to the top. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, in words, I made it when I sold, the pilot development deal.
Yes.
Like, I'm like, what? And then it's like, a year later, it's like, oh, it ain't gonna be no shout out. And the money's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm about to graduate from UCLA. Wow. Or I just graduated. So bills in 6 months I'm going to have to pay. So I actually for about a year and a half worked at an ad agency doing PR. Was miserable. No disrespect to the agency. I was miserable because of the...
for you.
But
did you do stuff at night?
The Lord was on my side there too because I was like, I'm going to take a low level so I'm not overworked so I can write at night, all that. So I did like a manager level, didn't even put a VP on my resume so that they would actually not think I'm overqualified. And then like, I'm going to hide out and be like, act like a 20-year-old.
Black woman dumbing herself down.
I dumbed myself down, down.
God.
Like, I don't know how to do that. And then the boss who created that unit of PR at this ad agency quit like in like a month or 2 months. She literally just created the thing.
And they were like, you ain't.
And they were looking at me. I'm like, no,
dumb.
I'm not doing it. I told them I'm not. It's bad when you have been refusing promotions.
Right,
I was like, I'm not doing it. I don't know nothing.
I don't know.
Don't look at me.
I don't know
So
how
they
to do
hired another person. She happened to be black.
Oh,
okay.
She knew my dream, and she would let me like go to meetings and like, yes, you ain't supposed to be here, like that kind of thing. She's even younger than me. She didn't even know she was younger than me at the time. And I'm like, girl, you're cool, and because she was like a singer too. Like everybody in LA is something else anyway.
Yeah, of course.
So it was different from being in Chicago trying to do that because I would have to disappear for meetings and all this, So I was going on staff meetings. So eventually, I got staffed on 13 Reasons Why.
Oh, so that was your first job?
That was my first job.
So you worked 2 years on 13 Reasons Why, and now you got your own show?
Yes.
Girl, you
see,
what?
It's the Lord's. It's the universe.
It's you.
I'm just saying.
I mean,
it's in that.
You.
What?
In that.
That's
beautiful.
That was a blessing.
So, because I direct, so I work a lot with showrunners, and I think it's like a skill that you have to learn.
Yes.
But also you had such a lot of experience coming up into it. Do you feel like you were able to transition into it well?
I was scared to death. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I definitely, I know some people have this thought like you don't need a showrunner as a new creator, like you could figure it out. But again, the universe sent me an article right before like this show was officially going to be a series and not just a pilot script. It was like a New York Times article talking about creators being set up. I think it was New York Times. Creators being set up to fail by running their own shows the first season. And the quote said, showrunners are made, not born. And that to me was my reinforcement because there were plenty of people saying, wow, you can run your own show, you can run. And I'm like, I'm too new. This is not like intuitive job like that.
Right.
So
actually, on that point,
good...
can we describe, because showrunner, we use it a lot here, but it's something I had never heard of, obviously, before coming to Hollywood.
Right.
If you hear, you know what a producer is, executive producer, but tell us what a showrunner is, and then what is a day like, a day in the life of a showrunner on your show?
Sure. They are the head writer, number one. So they are the final say on everything. And to be the final say on everything, you have to have had time in the game, skin in the game to know what won't work and will. Like, I know this won't work because of X. Or I know this is too much dialogue and this will kill our day. Or like I won't have that kind of, with having been on set for 2 days in my career as a writer. That, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Before this moment.
Oh, just stop for 1 second.
Yes.
As a writer, when you write an episode, you sometimes get to go
to
set,
but
to represent
depends
your
on the
script.
show.
So on 13 Reasons Why?
I was on someone else's script for 2 days, but it was someone else's script. Those 2 seasons, I had only had 2 set days.
2 days on
set. As a staff writer, you may never go on set.
Wow.
Like, it depends on how, it flows.
Wait. So you had 2 days on set, and then you were show running your own.
Well, I was the creator and learning to show run from my showrunner because I said I would like to be paired with a showrunner because that is before right now, like it's so many creators and so much content. It was always that unless you had a lot of time in the game in television, or at least a bit of time in the game in television, I had very little time in the game.
Yes.
Like, I'm not. And then I saw that article. So I was not mistaken.
Right.
I'm sure some people would have liked me not to have one, so because they had one less person they had to pay. But I wasn't going to be set up to fail.
Right.
and
and
this show
that
wouldn't
you
be
did
that show without the showrunner because of his. Just mentioned his resume.
Yeah.
He also knows pitfalls of comedy and how to run a room. So also what a showrunner does is they manage the writer's room because, you can stay stuck on an idea for an hour if you're not careful. So they keep the room running. They make decisions where we can't decide on what we want to do or like. They answer to the network. They're the manager of the entire show.
Gotcha.
And don't they do a lot in post too?
They are sitting and editing.
Edits.
So I'm sitting and editing with him. Basically, I'm literally and he allowed there have been lots of stories, and this is where I've had good grace too. A lot of stories about creators and showrunners not getting along, or showrunners taking over a creator's show or making it their own. Or he was always very good about this is your vision, this is your show. My job is to help it come to life. Yeah.
Amazing.
And teaching me how to do the thing.
Yeah.
So that, and we have the same sense of humor. That was a magic pairing.
Yeah.
So that's really the job of a showrunner. They hire, all the lead top people for all the roles as it relates to behind the scenes. And then, we all collectively, us and Will Packer, pick casting.
Yes.
And so that's a very collaborative. Everything's collaborative. But the writer's room and production really leans heavy on the showrunner.
I think it was such a smart idea for you and choice for you to choose someone to help you.
Absolutely.
Because I think you can get caught up in the allure of Hollywood and be like, oh yeah, they put me, this is my show, it's going, I'm going to do it. I know what I'm talking about. And then you fail because you really don't. And
even
people
though you had a great
will eat you alive. If they see that you are weak and you're not capable.
Absolutely.
They
will
I
didn't want to
devour.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to Sista Brunch with me, Anya Adams, and my fabulous co-host, Fancha Cox. That was our conversation with Latasha Gillespie, Amazon Studios Global Head of Diversity, Mickey Woodard, Head of Good Robot at Bad Robot, and Felicia Mary, Creator and Executive Producer of Bigger on BET. Y'all stay tuned because next week we'll have more of our favorite Sista Brunch interviews.
Oh, and also don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Sista Brunch Podcast. And, leave us some comments, interact with us. We are here to talk to you about this filmmaking industry, the entertainment industry, and media. We'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and comment on our Instagram page as well. We're also on Twitter at Sista Brunch and on Facebook at facebook.com/Sista Brunch Podcast. And while you're there on any of those platforms, let us know what you'd like to know more about or what questions you'd like us to answer. Also, don't forget to subscribe, rate, review our show after the show ends.
Our senior producer is Sonata Lee Narcisse. Our show producer is Brittany Turner. Our executive producer is Cristobal and Sia Boade. We'd like to acknowledge that the land we record our podcast on is the original land of the Tongva people, for those of us in Los Angeles. Can't wait to see you guys next time.